And we are back. That was round one. We're going into round two, and we have a nice feature match prepped between Spiffirific, a former champion of Eternal Journeys Peasant Charity Tournament, against Almost, and it's going to be an AP mid-range or AP Valkyries deck versus a Xenan Lifeforce deck.
I
Uh,
already love this list. I'm seeing Deathwing, I'm seeing Forensic Analyst, and Valkyries, one of my favorite kind of tribes in Eternal. So I am digging this list already.
yeah, so we saw a Homesick Yeti and Questioning Devotee in the last round. We now get to see Forensic Analyst, which is an interesting deck or an interesting card. Let's see if we can pull this up.
So the deck synergizes around Watchwing support, which is a relic that buffs, kind of acts like Warcry, but for Valkyries, which is extremely powerful for those of you. It sees constructed play in throne formats, so let alone in something as quote unquote, and not even powered down, but I think this format is still very powerful in Peasant. But yeah, go ahead and talk to us about Forensic Analyst.
So Forensic Analyst is a 3-cost 1/4 with flying that has an ultimate that says whenever an attachment goes to your void, transform it into a Chief Investigator West, which is a 4/4 that when it attacks, you make a 1/1 Valkyrie. The deck also plays around with the Watchwing support Martial Efficiency combo. Watchwing support only cares about attachments. It doesn't matter what attachments or how you play them. So Martial Efficiency can amplify to make a curse every time you amplify it. And that counts as an attachment. So with a Watchwing support in play, a Martial Efficiency amplifying for like 4 or 5 or 6, you're giving the top card of your deck like +10/+10. And if you have more than one Watchwing support, then it's just going to get even greater.
And of course, we're seeing they have the chance to dump their hand. So to refill, they're running D'Angelo's Might, which lets you draw cards equal to the highest strength among your units, which, much like what Noverb just said, you can easily make a 10/10 Flying Valkyrie and then immediately play the, not immediately, but the next turn, play Might and just refill your hand.
Absolutely. Usually it's just going to be for like a 4/4 Throne Warden, but it can get really up there. One of the like cool things about this deck is that you get to play Argenport Blueprints and Dark Return to get back these giant threats that you're creating. You can use Immortalize to turn them into exalted threats, which once you've gotten them back from Argenport Blueprints in the first place, will have Aegis and Endurance, and then Exalted, you're putting a 10/10 weapon on another one of your Valkyries that'll also give them Aegis and Endurance, and it's just so hard to win through that.
Yeah, one thing to note as well is that the majority of this deck already has evasion built into it. So buffing they're already getting damage, and buffing them just makes it that much more difficult. Now, granted, this deck does have plenty of ground units, but once again, there's evasion built in. So choosing your removal is going to be very crucial here.
Absolutely. I think we are ready for our first game of this round. This is round 2 of the Peasant Eternal Spring Open with Spifferific versus Almost.
So talk to us a little bit about the life gain deck, because this is something that we've seen since the beginning, the conception of competitive peasant tournaments here. Give our newcomers a little breakdown of the deck.
So the idea behind a life gain deck is using cards that want you to trigger Life Force, which is an ability that says as long as you've gained life this turn, and cards that play life gain. So it's an interesting give and a take where you want to play enough cards that gain you life and enough cards that want you to gain life. And that's really been driven home with the most recent set giving us Hive Hexagon, which is a 3-cost relic that lets you make a 2/2 flying bee at the end of your turn if you've gained life this turn.
Yeah, another great payoff as well. Are they running the? Oh no, I think he's a rare. There's one card that gives all your insects lifelink, I believe, but I think it's a rare. So, anyways, jumping into the game here, we're seeing Spifferific trying to figure out their hand here. I think this is a pretty easy mulligan here. They have 4 power, and yep, there they go. Oh wow, okay.
This is a much more solid hand. It is
Yeah,
worth noting when we're talking about Chief Investigator West, when cards like that transform into their other side, they lose all changes that were made to them. So if Spifferific's plan is to play a Vine Grafter and activate the ability targeting the Chief Analyst, that card, once it flips, will no longer have the +1/+1 on regen, or in the case of Watchwing support, the +10/+10. All right, so Almost has a nice start of a 3/2 that when it attacks, Almost will gain 1 life, starting off the triggers, and then going to play Premonition Wisp, which is immediately going to ultimate to make a 4/4 when that life gain trigger happens.
Yep, and you're starting to see some of the payoffs already, immediately having a whopping 9 power on the board. And we're also seeing 2 curtain calls for Almost in hand, which is an extremely powerful card. We've seen that when it immediately put Xenan on the map in these Peasant tournaments. An extremely powerful card.
So fun fact, the first time that we made the Xenan Lifeforce deck, myself and the Overmaster top forward and top aided with it, that was actually before Curtain Call existed. Curtain Call is a 3 mana fast spell that gives 2 of your units +2 attack and lifesteal. And if you have 4 time influence, all of your units, not just the ones that got targeted, all of your units cannot die this turn. And it makes the deck super hard to race and super hard to trade efficiently because Curtain Call also has Revenge. So when you play it, it'll go back to the top of your deck and eventually get played in the next 1 to 10 turns.
All right, so we're seeing both players kind of deploy their armies, but once again, we're now of note, luckily here, that the Almost is missing the second shadow influence for those curtain calls, which I think would have maybe really allowed them to really pull ahead in this game. But I mean, Spifferific does have some good blockers set up. A 4/4 with Aegis is essentially going to be able to block the majority of the board. And that's why we're going to see Almost get in there just with the 4/4. Spifferific decides to trade there. Do you think there's some value there to hold up the armor? Do you think they figured they're going to, all right, well, that explains their game plan.
Yeah, getting it back with Dark Return is nice and solid. I also think that getting rid of a 4/4 before Curtain Call happens is super important. Almost made a great choice in grabbing Vara's Choice, and that's going to allow them to deal with this 2/2 Vine Grafter and return to the hand before they mark it, hopefully.
Ooh.
Now we get to see... Oh, I guess we're not going to go see a Danglo Might Right yet. We actually get to see a West come into play, triggering the warp off of Watchwing support.
Man, sometimes you just gotta trust your deck. Look at that. I mean, that's one of the ways that this deck does get card advantage, right? Some of the cards there, as we're seeing, have warp that allow you to play them off the top of the deck. And Spifferific just kind of had that vibe. He had a feeling. He played to the board, right, and got rewarded. We see the silence.
We also see the Sickle Slicer on the top of the deck as well that we saw get +2/+2.
Yep. And that's now you're gonna see the chain, right, where the slicer is gonna get bigger. It got bigger. It's gonna be able to trigger the. Oh my goodness,
that's so great.
And they still have the power to leave up Defile as well to deal with either the Grafter or the Life Licking Bat. Things. This is gonna be another good match. Of note, still Almost is still missing that second. I stand corrected. Got that second shadow influence, and now Curtain Call is online here. What do you think the attack is for Almost?
I believe it's everything. If I had to guess, I think it's everything just because Curtain Call means that you don't have to do the math as much. But here we just see the one singular attack to play it safe. Let's see.
Yep, fair enough.
That's getting defiled. The time is waiting for Curtain Call, and I guess we're just waiting to see if we want to use Curtain Call not to lose the 2/2.
Yep, and there's obviously a decision point. Almost in the tank here trying to figure it out. Of no, like you said, it does have Revenge, so firing it off here does not mean you're kind of just getting a 1-for-1, and they are going to go ahead and fire it off.
Absolutely.
Activating it, buffing 2 different units, and of course the entire team gets indestructible or can't be killed this turn. So overall, not too bad. We're going to see Etchings come in, grab a power, go to the market.
Yeah, so I think that it's generally a safe attack when you have Curtain Call because you're able to save every unit. So no matter what kind of bad blocks you get, you will still not lose any unit, and you will trade up however you wish because the Curtain Call goes +2 to different things. We just got a very nice. It's Called
Yeah,
Behold
one
the
of my
Truth, right?
favorite cards from Limited. Behold the Truth, just a great way to end the game. Another pump spell. The Amplify is 6, so we're not going to get the +2/+2, but it is still going to give all of almost units +1/+1 and Overwhelm. So Spifferific already making the decision of cashing in one of those D'Angelo Mites for, oh, nice. Oh, that is fantastic here. Grabbing an Eavesdrop with the power to play it. 2 cards in hand for almost, so it's going to grab both of them. And Spifferific already knows that it's something valuable because almost went to the market for it. It is a decision between Eavesdrop, but I think, and Slicer, but I think you just got to go for it since you went to the trouble and gonna definitely get rewarded there, taking another Grafter and that win con from Almost. That was fantastic. What is Almost looking for? Are they just hoping to top deck the curtain
Oh,
call or?
this is gonna be a rough one. I think is almost playing the Hive Hexagon. Are we just like hoping to get Hive and just slowly overwhelm them with 2/2 flyers? Is that the best way to win now?
I mean, they still have a commanding board presence here, right? Man, he did it before I was gonna. Oh man, we're seeing a 5/7 Valkyrie here, and more. Oh, look at this, just completely refilling the grip. What is Spifferific looking to do next turn? Are they gonna fire off this martial efficiency, play the slicer, develop their board a little bit, start to turn the corner? I mean, they have the smaller board, but I
So
mean,
at current, I don't think Spiff is really worried about much. We have the 5 blockers, we have martial, or 4 blockers, we have martial efficiency to really degrade any good attackers that almost might want to put up. I think martial efficiency is probably the best play to set up because it will set them up with a giant unit to play in future turns. But as it stands, like your sickle slicers or silver slicers and your other weapons are already getting these triggers off of the
yeah,
Watchwing supports. So you
yeah.
don't need to go all in on martial efficiency.
Well, I like the one thing that you mentioned as well, where kind of using it maybe potentially defensively as a reactive spell to counter the curtain call would be extremely powerful as well, right? Because you're still getting your triggers off of the Watchwing support, but now you can see where the +2/+2 or +2/+0 goes, and then negate it with the efficiency, right?
Yep.
The interesting play here, going with the Deathwing to gain some life versus playing the Warden to get some more armor on this Slicer. Do you let this Slicer go, or do you try to buff it with the armor since it is 5 power?
So unfortunately, we missed the time where the slicer can kill that 5/5 before it gain 1 life from the painting off the top. So I think we just trade the 5 for the 4/4, but Spiff chooses to just gain more armor to make it a little bit bigger. It is the strongest weapon that we have at current. And I think this might be a time where we are just playing a martial efficiency for 3 because we do have 2 supports in play. It's going to give +12/+12 to the top unit weapon of our deck, which we still haven't even seen the whatever got the pluses from playing the slicer in the first place. So it's going to be at least a +16/+16. Never mind. We drew the Throne Warden.
Now, the one thing of note as well is that Spifferific is starting to pull ahead on this game, but I mean, the life gain deck gains life, right? We're seeing almost at a comfortable 38 life. So it's going to be a
Absolutely.
while before they start to feel the pressure of Spifferific kind of starting to get in there, correct?
Yeah, so what's interesting, I'm looking at almost deck now. We have Hive Hexagon, which is going to be a nice way to kind of match Spifferific on the life gain, like making 2/2s to Spiff playing Valkyries with flying. However, I was noticing this earlier. Almost is playing a split market, but not in the same way that Mandrake split it. They're playing with Time Etchings and Vine Grafter. So this means that the Vine Grafter can grab Recovery or Aramot's Machinations, or if they draw a new Vine Grafter, I don't know if that's the original one or a new one, they can get back the uh, curtain call that they put in at the start of the game. So there is a curtain call in the market for Vine Grafter, Recovery, which is a return a unit you control to your hand and return a unit from your discard pile to your hand, and then Aramot's Machinations. The time etchings can get an Ancient Bauble, the Recovery, and the Machinations. So I
Yeah,
don't.
looking at Spifferific's list, we've kind of seen everything that they have at their disposal at this point. I mean, they do have the market that we talked about, but there's nothing there that's really going to tip the scales of this game too much. We're just seeing their game plan. This is exactly what the Valkyries deck wants to do, and this is what they got. Like, I'm looking at their list for anything that may kind of break this parity more, but there really isn't. Like, they're just going to draw more cards, continue to play relics to or attachments to buff their units, and kind of get in there that way. So of note, despite that, let's see what its name is real quick. The Cult Aspirant being an 8/8, it is still one cost unit, which means that the file is still going to be able to take it out in a clean manner.
Yeah,
So it's getting big.
The unfortunate thing about this, the bauble making Cult Aspirant to get bigger slowly, is even at that speed, it's still not fast enough to match what is going to be a 15-14 quick draw weapon off the top of the deck for Spiff.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Love it. My two favorite things, Valkyries and weapons. There was one thing I regret about when I got into Eternal is that I missed the age of the armory decks.
I unfortunately existed during that time, like the tail end of it, so I got the nostalgia for it and the ever like yearning want to make it good again.
Oh man, when you had the what was it, Blade of Creation, the one that doubles
Edge of
its
Prophecy. Yeah.
yeah. Oh man, that list that you made, it was so good. For those of you that guys haven't seen it, definitely go back to some of our older tournament videos and check it out where Nova just made some ridiculous weapons. Unfortunately, there wasn't a way I think to give it overwhelm, right? I think that was
this was before markets existed in Peasant. So what we eventually got was a way to like put there's like a 5-cost exalted unit that gives you overwhelm, and it has overwhelm itself, but it's like a 5-cost 4/2.
Yeah.
I've been messing around with playing that in a fire delivery market. So you play the edge, and then you like next turn when you have some power, play delivery, grab the 5-mana 4/2, give yourself overwhelm, and then you just kill them that way. The reason that deck loses is like against FTS Sack, they just have so many random 1/1s that you're just breaking your face on a 1/1 over and over again until they eventually break the weapon, and then you try to get the weapon back, and it's a repeated process, and you just can't get through. So now we have
a slightly slower hand from Spifferific, right? No out the door aggression. We are seeing the Tinker that they could play followed up with a Slicer, but nothing that really kind of starts to get the deck engine going. Almost here is running, I mean, a solid curve here, right? We can essentially go 1, 2, 3. They are able to play either the Aspirant or the I guess they're both the Aspirant. What's the other one? Life something?
Gosh. Life Speaker, I believe.
Life Speaker. There we go. Yep.
Which has Inspire to make your units gain lifesteal.
Yeah. So are you going to play the Life Speaker here, or are you going to play the Grafter here on 2? They're able to play both.
I think it's a pretty safe Aspirant or Life Speaker because you aren't under any trouble, and the reason you play Vine Grafter on 2 most times is to stem the bleeding. With Spiff not playing a 2-drop, you don't really need to stem any bleeding, and on top of that, almost just playing a life gain deck. Even if we were worried about that, it's just not a huge factor. The Aspirant is going to get bigger than a 2/2 Vine Grafter or a 2/2 Tinker Unionist, so this Deathwing is going to be kind of nice to be able to block that a little bit. We're getting a Deathwing off the top, which means that the next weapon that Spifferific plays is going to have Deadly and Lifesteal. And on top of that, if it is the Silver Slicer, it's going to have Quick Draw Deadly as a weapon, which means that it'll kill anything that it puts its mind to.
Yeah, we'll see now if almost gets to draw the power. They do not draw the power to level up the Life Speaker here, so still going to stay a 1/1 and doubling up super Lifesteal on the bat they just drew, getting the Inspired trigger as well as just having Lifesteal to go with. So, I mean, you don't get the advantage of going to the market here, but you still try to hit that third time source here because you do have the Curtain Call in hand and you do want to get to 4 power. I mean, even 5, so you can activate Grafters immediately once you play them.
Yeah, I think it's probably reasonable to... Oh, you can't even go to the market right now. So, like, do we play the Etchings just to get a power? I think you do. just so that we can get closer to this curtain call.
Yeah, because curtain call is really it's the ability for your units not to die is what sets it apart, right? The +2/+2 is good, but it's the fact that you can save all your units that really kind of sets it apart. And when you're 2 power away, I think you just kind of have to. We see the slicer come down for specific spifferific. Let's see what they go for. They can get essentially 2 attacks. No, they can't. Well, yeah, they can. They can deploy a unionist to block if they
I
really wanted to. They decide not. They're going to just cash it in, take it out the Mandrake, leaving the Life Speaker on the board with the 2/2 Grafter, and they're going to feel comfortable enough to get in for 2.
I
And
think that's a reasonable line. The Mandrake was the most worrying thing on the board. If you trigger a life gain and you make your 1/1 or your 2/2 have +1/+1 to make it a 3/3, that's fine. But the real problem is if you give your 2 Mandrakes and then a third once you gain a life, if you give them all deadly, it gives almost a really good attacking force because having to block deadly units is doing exactly what Spifferific is doing to him. So it kind of changes the playing field a bit, especially when those regen units have deadly.
Spifferific is going to go to the market here. Let's see what they end up pulling out. Don't think there's a clear-cut answer to this board, and obviously it looks like it because they're in the tank for a second. They end up grabbing the eavesdrop, going to grab the last 2 cards, which, let's see, this is going to be interesting, right? Because almost is only going to be able to play one. Oh, no, I take that back. They are able to play 2 things. So eavesdrop just being a turn too slow this go around. Let's see if Almost has the read. I mean, it was the line that Spifferific took in game 1, so it must be on Almost's radar. And they're going to go ahead and play the priest. They do have the choice of sacrificing the bat if they want to gain the life and play the hexagon or the hive hexagon, like you mentioned. That is going to give them a flyer. It won't have lifelink, but it will replace the 2/2 or the 1/1 bat.
It's not even necessarily a sacrifice if you attack with the 1/1, because you could still play Curtain Call at the sacrifice of your hive hexagon to trade with one of the Deathwings.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like this line. It disincentivizes Spiff to use Eavesdrop because they're only at 1 card now. But Spiff is going to take that anyway.
I mean, of note, Eavesdrop does steal the graveyard as well. So now that Mandrake unable to get it back with something like a Dark Ritual or, like you mentioned, the Recovery, Aramot's Machinations. So there's something to it. I think Spiffer just kind of felt like, okay, maybe he had the read, or maybe this is going to be my best chance because it's the last card of his hand he hasn't played. And so they fired it off here. What are we looking to how to break parity here? Because right now both armies are kind of staring at each other. No one having a really clear cut line to take the advantage. What are the 2 players looking to draw off the top of their deck?
So Spiff is looking for that weapon that was given Deadly and Lifesteal, which, if it is the Silver Slicer, is a way to start running through the opponent's board and removing their good attackers without any recourse. I think what Almost wants is just more power. Getting the power to start empowering to gain life from the 1/2, which will give them 2/2 flyers, will help them trigger more of their effects. Like, that 1/2 is sitting at a really good spot, especially with the Discipline Amanara and the, what is that card called? It's a 2-cost 0/4 in Almost hand that once you gain life becomes a 4/4 with Overwhelm. It's called Arcanum Seeker. So really what Almost wants right now is just power, because once we start seeing power, we can put away, I guess, just any card that they draw and grab an Aramot's Machinations now that Eavesdrop is gone. Because we have the Amanara now. We have your choice of good 1-drops and then your choice of good 2-drops, so that if we start trading in combat, the Aramot's Machinations is really going to get back a nice board. However, Spifferific is doing the line that he loves to do against me in testing, where you give your Tinker Unionist regen. And it just becomes so hard to deal with in a board stall. I think this is Spiff's way to break through here, forcing the breaking of the regens off of the Vine Grafters. I think it's a pretty free block with this 4/4, so it's a solid way to get through some of their defenses.
Yep, we're getting more Warcry triggers, hopefully on those weapons, and then they could Dark Return back the Tinker and play it all over again. So this is, like you mentioned, a very good attrition tactic here because you're going to get, at least 2 good attacks here with Warcry triggers. Very powerful effect in this deck. The slightly offhand, seeing so much graveyard kind of interaction in this format because of the fact that games tend to be a little bit slower. Do you think there's some value? Have we seen a deck starring, especially time decks, playing the, forgive me, the 1/4 monk that has flying on your opponent's turn that stops graveyard shenanigans?
Yeah, so Kickflip Monk is a 2-cost 2/2 that while it's your opponent's turn gets +2 health and has flying, I think, right? And it says that cards can't leave voids. I've put it in a few different decks. It's a solid card. It's also really interesting with cards like Cerso's Choice that let you play a like 2 damage to all units at instant speed, so that you can do it on your opponent's turn when your Kickflip Monk has the health, so it won't die to the Cerso's Choice. So
Gotcha.
I'm playing it in more like controlling decks.
All right, so we're seeing Spifferific not wait for the 8th power, just play another 4, step on the gas, keeping pressure on almost. They want to leave up the martial efficiency for next turn, so they don't attack except in the air here. But we're starting to see those life gain triggers because of the priest. Just about any draw. Ooh, there we go. There we go. So they could play this and still have the ability to fire off martial efficiency and defile. This seems like a really good A-space turn for Spifferific because... Well,
first, we want to clear off this 6/6 with lifesteal, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. We're going for the overall instead. I think I would have gone for the 6/6 with lifesteal because that triggers other units.
Yeah, however, but I think what they wanted, I think what they're looking to do is have it trigger mid-combat.
Sure.
But wait a minute, they can actually just get rid of it. Oh, I see. I think what they're going to do is wait till blocks happen and then defile it in response so he doesn't get the life gain trigger.
So either way, it didn't really matter. It's going to be getting rid of both of their 6/6s for free.
Yeah, but yeah, that makes sense now because then they don't get the trigger regardless off of hitting the weapon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is going to be a really good turn for Spifferific. And then, of course, they're not afraid of anything, having perfect information. No card in almost his hand. This was just a good series of draws here from Spifferific. And then, of course, seeing the Warp, man. We're really seeing the power of Warp. Just getting 1 or 2 cards off of it. Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Clearing this board, you're not necessarily worried about the life gain trigger. At this point, you've cleared all the payoffs.
And almost made some blocks to... I think trade missing the fact that they had Regen as well. These Tinker Unionists are so great because the last one that you don't play goes to your discard pile, and as we saw earlier, can be Dark returned back, and you can play as many as you want. So, okay, I see. So we're trying to get things into the discard pile specifically to play Machinations to make them bigger. Okay.
Okay. All right. This is some next level gaming for sure. Seeing the Slicer take out another blocker, and now, yeah. All right. Still leaving some blockers back to protect that weapon as it's additional removal.
Yep. We don't want to lose this weapon at this point. Spiff is not playing many things that can get a weapon back from the void. So once we lose this quick draw, deadly.
Of note, again, Defile stealing the creature it kills from the void. So Machination's not going to be able to call back that Life Speaker. Kind of one of the best interactions, right? Getting it back. It's a 1-drop, so it doesn't cost you anything, and then you're immediately able to activate its ultimate again, make it even bigger. And this is going to be tough. I don't think there's an out here for Almost. Being at 2 life, they're able to get back a 7/7, a 5/5 with Lifesteal, and a set. All right, I take that back. Well, no, never mind, because they don't have flyers.
Right. So in most fair games, this would actually be a great Paramount's Machinations return.
Yes, but absolutely fantastic.
I think Tinker Unionist has broken the fairness out of this game, and we are well into... That was the second game, right? So that is the match. Like that.
Yep, Spifferific took it down 2-0 over Almost. Valkyries just being the evasive threat over... Insane life gain. I mean, we saw the life gain deck do it. We saw both decks do their things, right? And unfortunately, I think the big deciding factor in that game too was the fact that we did not see a curtain call, right?
Right.
I think
the lack of power on Almost side really messed with that.
Yeah, and once again, going back, curtain call just being able, like we saw with the regen, right? The regen on the Tinkers was huge because now it made blocks less incentivized. He still got value off of it. And so Curtain Call does that for the life gain deck. And the fact that almost didn't have access to that showed it, where they didn't have any good attacks, even with their large creature or units, because those Deathwings have deadly. So one way or another, those creatures were going to die unless they had Current Call up. I think if we did see that, it would have been a different game where they were able to get in there with those that overwhelm damage to start chipping away, breaking weapons and things like that. But unfortunately, the evasion got through.
Absolutely. Sorry, I am now looking through for another feature.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, you guys definitely got to see, it was super cool because we saw the deck work with Watchwing support, which was absolutely broken, and work without it, which was still very strong, just kind of nickel and diming and getting some additional synergy. I mean, really, it was just like you mentioned, it was off of the back of 3 cards. It was Grafter giving regen to the Tinker, playing Tinkers, then getting the Tinker back with Dark Ritual or Dark Return, and then playing more Tinkers. And Tinker...
But notably, the Tinker does also need the Argenport blueprints to make an heirloom. Because the Tinker doesn't have Unleash on its own, it requires a relic. So it's either a weapon, like the weapons that we saw, or the blueprints, or Watchwing support. And all of those combine to allow Tinker to do what it wants to do. And Binding Grafter giving it regen makes it bigger, makes it harder to block it, and it also makes it like the regen will eat either a bigger unit's block, or it'll actually just eat a unit that is smaller than it or equal size. And being able to get it back with Dark Return, as you said, was just a way to continually press the board advantage.
Yeah, it was a really well-designed deck. I see so much synergy in it. Another thing that kind of played in a little bit that we didn't see too much of is the fact that Rail Driver Valkyrie, whenever you play an attachment, it gets the ultimate, it gets to do 1 damage to any target. And that, in a field that has a bunch of regen, that makes a difference, right? When you think you have a safe block, where you think you have at least 1 life to give, essentially, that freely takes it away from you. And the fact that we saw Spiffirific be able to activate that, take a regen shield off of something, and then swing that same turn kind of definitely makes the math a lot harder for someone like Almost.
Yeah, the regen shields always mess with combat. Like, making it so that you have to, especially with Taunt, like you have to account for all of these units that are forcing you to block, and none of them are going to be good blocks, because when you block a regen unit, it's just not going to get through any damage. It's not going to kill the unit. So it is just a wasted damage that you wish that you could be putting on, I don't know, like a Deathwing, or what else was that? The 4/4 with Aegis, the Throne Wardens and whatnot.
Yep. Yeah, man, both these decks, just looking at these lists, they're so clean. And I really do appreciate the life gain list because, like you mentioned, it's a fine line to juggle between how much life gain you put in the deck and how many life gain payoffs you put in. And the fact that they were able to juggle that, where we saw variations of it, right? Sanctuary Priest, so when they draw power late, we saw the Life Speaker to just give everything lifelink so they trigger themselves. And then the inclusion of Hexagon, I mean, Hive Hexagon definitely played a role there. We didn't see it do anything backbreaking, but the fact that it gave flyers, so Spifferific was unable to just freely attack. And even in the last turn, Spifferific had the weapon to get the blocker out of the way. But if not, that was going to give them an extra turn to draw something off the top. So, absolutely. I mean, there's definitely some brewing. I think the design is great. Premonition Wisp, 3 mana or 3 power, adding 6/6 to the board. That's pretty strong. We saw that play a role in the early game, in the first game.